Welcome to Growth Investing Mastery. Today we're going to review Reddit's Q1 2025 earnings. As a reminder, this is not investment advice or recommendations to buy any stocks. The topics we're going to review regarding Reddit's earnings are to review our earnings process, and we'll look at hints from Q4 management gave about Q1. Next, we'll look at where Reddit guided and where they actually landed. We'll review the numbers and we'll review the narrative for Reddit. And management gave a bit of a curveball on the earnings call regarding DAUs, or daily active users. And we'll do some metric analysis of what the CEO said and why it may be a concern. And lastly, we'll have a summary of the earnings report. I wanted to talk about what our process looks like for reviewing earnings reports. First, I reread the last transcript printed out from 3 months ago, and I'll review it a day or two before the company is about to report. I'll highlight that transcript with a red pen, which is different from the original color I highlight with, which is blue. I'll note the previous guides the company gave on specific company metrics, and I'll make guesses where I think the company lands, and guess where the new guidance will go. I'll also check where analysts think the company is going to land. And I didn't used to do this as much, but I've been finding some valuable information regarding where analysts think companies are going. And I'll load the investor relations page for Reddit in this example before checking where the after hours price goes. I'll view the press release on the investor relations page around 4:15 p.m. or when the company reports earnings after the bell closes. I'll compare the guesses I made on numbers such as revenue to where the company actually landed. After reviewing the press release, I'll make a guess where the price is moving after hours, and then I'll check the after hours price. If there's a big discrepancy there could be an opportunity. I'll also print the new transcript when it's available, and sometimes it takes a few hours or even the next day before the transcripts are uploaded to data providers. And I'll print that transcript out and highlight interesting points with a blue pen. We're effectively starting the cycle fresh again with the new transcript. And our game plan will be to look at our next actions. Do we add, hold, or sell this position? Reviewing Reddit's last Q4 transcript, let's see what hints they made about the upcoming Q1 quarter. The CEO said, "We've recovered so far in Q1 and we've regained momentum." And that was regarding the Google algorithm changes. Reddit takes question and answers from users on Reddit during their earnings call. And one user asked, "I've noticed a substantial increase in the quality and quantity of ads since Q3. That's a good sign for investors that the upcoming quarter may be strong, especially if users are noticing there's more ads, and the ads are more relevant as well. The CEO did reiterate on the Google changes there's no revenue impact, and he said, "We feel very good about the pace that we're on in Q1. So here the big hint is Q1 is going to be strong likely. Taking a look at what Reddit guided for on their Q4 report, they expected Q1 revenue to come in from $360 million to $370 million, which would be up 52% year over year. And they projected adjusted EBITDA to be between 80 to 90 million. My guesses of where Reddit would actually land was revenue of 410 million and adjusted EBITDA of 125 million. So I was projecting that Reddit would beat their guidance by a significant amount. I guess the new guides for revenue and adjusted EBITDA would be revenue of 420 to 430 million in Q2 and adjusted EBITDA of 140 to 150 million in Q2. Let's look at the guides versus actuals and how my guesses actually compare to that. The company guided Q1 revenue to be between 360 and 370 million, or up 52% year over year. The company guided adjusted EBITDA to be between 80 to 90 million, and my guesses were for revenue of 410 million, where they actually landed at 392, and I guessed adjusted EBITDA of 125, and they landed at 115, so my guesses were a little bit higher than they actually landed. However, on the new guidance for revenue, I guess 420 to 430 million, and that came in at 410 to 430. So basically exactly the same, but they had a little bit wider range. I guess the new guide on adjusted EBITDA to be between 140 to 150 million, and it landed at 110 to 130, which is a little bit lower than I was expecting. With all that information, I guess the after hours price would be up 10%. And when I checked the first time, it was up 16%. However, later on, it fluctuated quite heavily based on some things said in the conference call, which we'll review soon. Let's now review the numbers Reddit announced for Q1. They got revenue of 392 million, which was up 61% year over year. And daily active uniques was up 31% year over year to 108 million. Weekly active users was 401 million, which was also up 31% year over year. Gross margin was 90.5%, and that's up 190 basis points year over year. Net income landed at 26 million, which made for a 7% net income margin. And adjusted EBITDA landed at 115 million, which is a 29% adjusted EBITDA margin. Operating cash flow was 128 million, which was a record highest ever, and that made up 33% of revenue, which is encouraging. US ad revenue was up 56% year over year, and international revenue surpassed that, being up 83% year over year. The data licensing business came in at 34 million, which is up 66% year over year. But I was hoping to see a little more increase in that because I believe previous quarters were in the 20 millions range, so it's not going up that much sequentially. Total adjusted costs were up only 19% year over year, and a tiny 1% quarter over quarter. So that's great to see that costs aren't going up too much. Reddit's G&A headcount went down sequentially, which is pretty interesting. It was down 5% quarter over quarter. So they've been able to probably automate some jobs at their workplace. The total employees is now 2,300, which is up 3% quarter over quarter. So they're still hiring on the tech side. It just seems like administratively they need less staff. Let's now review the narrative Reddit told on this latest earnings report. They've been upgrading Reddit search with a product called Reddit Answers. And Answers has 1 million weekly users. It's now open to Australia and the UK, along with the United States. Machine translation is now available in 13 different languages. The countries France, Spain, and Brazil are growing twice as fast as total international revenue, and the top of the funnel makes up 40% of revenue, while mid and lower tier of the funnel makes up 60%. Total active advertisers was up 50% year over year. 10 of the top 15 verticals grew over 50% year over year, and ads and comments contributed just 6% of total impressions. Ad pricing was also up year over year. A product called Dynamic Product Ads, or DPA, is currently in beta testing, and DPAs average 90% higher return on investment, I believe that is, compared to campaigns last year. Let's continue looking at the narrative for Reddit in Q1. Lower funnel conversion covered by CAPI, or their conversions API, tripled year over year. AI enhancements enabled administrators to give 10 times the number of insight reports to the customers buying ads. And companies using Reddit Pro grew over 2x from Q4, so Reddit Pro seems to be taking off. The company also mentioned that Q1 is historically the slowest seasonal quarter. Total diluted share count fell sequentially again, and while the company doesn't explicitly mention buybacks, it sounds like they are implementing a buyback strategy of shares. International growth was the fastest in 3 years, and the company's auto moderation tools are helping users post and catching if they might make some errors for a specific subreddit so their post doesn't get blocked. There was a part in the Q&A about data licensing, and management said it's still too early to talk about renewals. Google Gemini is being used for the language translations, and there's a symbiotic relationship between Google and Reddit. One analyst was asking more about that relationship. The question was centered around if those translated pages actually show up in Google well. And management replied they're working closely with Google hand in hand to make sure that those pages do show up well. The company did mention they're making some investments in the $10 to $20 million range. And I think that might be in startup companies that are in their field or niche of social media. They mentioned that more mods equals more communities, and they're encouraging their moderators. Yet maybe the biggest story we got from this earnings report was a big curveball that management threw us on the call. Originally, the stock price was up nearly 20% after hours, and then at 5:20 p.m., the price crashed to be near break-even, and it even went negative at some point. If we follow the timeline closely here, the company began their conference call at 5 p.m., and 20 minutes into the call, the price of the stock crashed. 20 minutes is usually about where the question and answer session starts, so it's possible one of the questions may have changed the opinion of many investors. It was hard for me to fathom what could have wiped out 20% of the value of Reddit, because I thought the overall report sounded pretty good. Let's talk more about what this curveball is that management gave. And the CFO had said, "We ended Q1 with momentum. As of April, we're off to a good start." That all sounded good for Q2, but then the CEO contradicted her and said, "To give you an early read on Q2, through the month of April, we're seeing total DAUs growing in the high teens range year over year." Keep in mind, the company just reported a 31% year-over-year growth on DAUs, so high teens for Q2 would be a quite poor result. There was one follow-on question in the question and answer session about this high teens range for DAUs, and the CEO said, "We expect some bumps. Some bumps are normal. It's probably more bumpy than usual, typically because of evolution." However, the problem with this statement is if we go back and actually look at DAUs in Q1 of 2024, they were 82.7 million. And if we assume a high teens, even at the top end of the range, a 19% increase, that would be DAUs at 98.4 million. In this latest quarter, though, they just reported DAUs of 108 million. So does that mean they lost a bunch of DAUs recently? I'm actually beginning to wonder if the CEO misspoke about that metric, or if he's really saying we'll see a big sequential decline on the DAUs. That does raise a concern. What if AI tools have become so prevalent that people are going less to Reddit and just using the quick answers from Google Gemini or these other AI products? The CFO's comments about we're off to a good start and the CEO's comments seem to contradict each other. And I can't make complete sense out of the CEO's statement on the high teens growth rate for those DAUs just yet. Let's summarize what we talked about for Reddit's Q1 2025 earnings. The actual results and new guidance look strong. There's promising results on product development, especially with the Answers platform and ad tech as well. Licensing deals are making up more revenue, but the growth is a little bit slower than I was expecting there. And my original thesis was these licenses could bring in a lot more revenue. However, international is ramping heavily with a lot of runway, and translation pages should provide a boost to the overall ad real estate. I do have concerns about the DAU numbers on the next quarter, specifically because the CEO actually tanked the stock with one of his comments about DAU growth in the next quarter. I am wondering if other AI answers, other AI products may be taking away from Reddit somewhat. I'm still keeping Reddit as a top confidence position because I think the actual results and guidance were strong, but that concern is actually pretty big about the AI answers and DAUs and things like that. So I ended up trimming a small amount after the price boost recently. And I'll probably take a few more days to digest what the CEO said about those DAUs and see if I come up with a different opinion coming up. This concludes the review of Reddit's earnings for Q1 of 2025. And as a reminder, this is not investment advice or recommendations to buy Reddit or any other stocks. Thank you.